So once again, welcome and good evening to our autumn lecture with Reverend Dr. Michael Chu tonight, and we are so glad you can make it. This lecture is proudly co-presented by the Melbourne School of Theology and the Centre for Asian Christianity, or the CAC, at the Brisbane School of Theology. My name is Grace, and I'm the director of the CAC, and together with Andrew, who is the CEO from MST, we are facilitating the lecture tonight. Tonight is relatively simple. After our introductions, Dr. Chu will lecture for approximately 1 hour, and following that, we'll have a time of questions. So during that time, you can type your questions using the Zoom chat function, and Andrew and I will compile and facilitate the questions from the chat and also from the floor. If you haven't already, please be sure to put yourself on mute. So Michael Chu is the Josiah Mann Associate Professor of Practical Studies and Vice President of the China Graduate School of Theology. He served as the Senior Minister at Northern District's Chinese Christian Church in Sydney. He completed his MA at Moore College and his DMin through Moreling College, and his dissertation there led to his book, Intercultural Competence, Cultural Intelligence for the Chinese Migrant Church. So let's welcome Michael Chu, and I'll hand the time to Andrew to help us to get to know Michael a bit better.
Cool. Thanks, Grace, and welcome everyone. Really excited about tonight, and we want to just learn a bit more about Michael, Dr. Michael, I should say. So I've got a few questions for you, Michael, if you don't mind. And the first one being, I hear you have a nickname. Can you let us know this nickname and how it came about?
My nickname is Josiah, because in Chinese Chu is is similar to piggy, so Josiah. So some more close friends, they will call me say Josiah. So
and in translation to English, what would that mean?
So it's picky, just a picky.
Oh, picky. Okay, sure. Interesting. And how did you get this nickname?
Oh, from very young,
Okay.
because my surname is Chu, so in Cantonese Chu, so it's
sorry, I get it. Yep.
Tone of pig. So
I see. Very interesting. That's great. And when you're not preaching, teaching, or working hard, Michael, what do you do in your spare time?
I do a bit of swimming, table tennis, watching YouTube, all those stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. And if you had to have one last meal, Michael, what would it be?
One last meal.
Yes.
Let me see. I think we'd like to have a durian. Lao Lin.
Oh no.
In Hong Kong, particularly in Australia, I miss that. But Hong Kong, I enjoy a little bit. But I love durian very much.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough,
Crazy.
Michael. You and my wife would be the same.
It tastes like heaven, no?
Wow.
It smells like hell.
I see. In my house, it's called the forbidden fruit. That's great. Thanks, Michael. And last question, actually, in the Bible, aside from Jesus, who would you have liked to meet the most?
Barnabas.
Barnabas. Why is that?
He's low key.
Yep.
But at a certain right time, he would come forward to help people, give people a lift, and I think he has done a lot of lasting effect on people close to him.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it. Excited about your lecture, Dr. Michael Chu. Yeah, I'll pass it to you now. So over to you.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, let me share the screen. So, okay. So, good evening, everyone. So lovely. I'm so grateful that I could be here from Northern Hemisphere and speak to people from down under. And particularly thanks to Center for Asian Christianity and MTS and MST, I mean, sorry. And I think your invitation to me is a really great encouragement to me. I think when the invitation come to me, I almost say a yes without any thinking, because the topic is something close to my heart, and I love to share with people, particular people, the church leaders in Australia. I think not only Asian churches, but also the Caucasian churches. You know, as far as I know, many Caucasian pastors, they have a heart for Asians. I want to really reach out to the Asians. So I really give thanks for all these things. I tell a bit of my background. I born in Hong Kong, educated in Hong Kong, or I would say I made in Hong Kong, manufactured in Hong Kong. And then I studied philosophy in uni, and afterwards I become a high school teacher. And then I also become a staff worker at Hong Kong FES. You know, in Australia you have AFES, right? In Hong Kong we also have a Hong Kong FES. So I become a staff worker there to help young people, the students, and help them to become leaders, leading Bible study, pointing people to Jesus, so on and so forth. And then in 1992, I migrated to Sydney. And then I ministered in Northern District Chinese Christian Church, so NDCCC, for 25 years. I didn't thought I could survive that long, 25 years, half a 1/4 century. But somehow 25 years gone, and at the time I was thinking, probably I would retire from this position. But in 2017, I out of my surprise, the college I studied here in CGST, they extend an invitation to me and asked me to come back to become a teacher here. So basically now I teach practical subjects, say pastoral ministry, pastoral care, preaching, leadership, conflict prevention, worship, all those stuff. So okay, so this is me. Tonight I would like to share with you four parts. The first two is more about the context, the Asian migrants. Who are we? Who are the Asian migrants? And number two is the Asian church context. So, and then the number three and number four is about the cultural intelligence. Hopefully, of course, in the Asian church there are a lot of challenges. So how could we deal with that? So one of the approaches I take is the cultural intelligence, cultural competence, and then finally I would do some practical implication. So this is what I want to do. This is so far what I can get from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. As of 30 of June 2022, 29.5% of our population was born overseas. That means it's 7.7 million migrants. And among these 7.7 million, we have around 1/4, 29.3%, are first generation. That means that they born overseas, but they migrate to Australia. But we have also the 22.2% second generation. So that means their parents migrate to Australia, but they follow their family. They come to Australia as well. So this is about the migrants. Among this group of migrants, the biggest group is from England. So These three tickets are from 2010, 2015, 2020, or is the biggest group is from England. But you notice that India, China, Philippines, Vietnam. So these four group of Asian migrants, they're on the rise. Say from 2010, 2015, 2020. So these four countries, people from all these four countries, they are all on the rise. So that means we could anticipate more and more Asian migrants. Of course, maybe incompatible with the people from England or from New Zealand, but you could imagine from India, from China, from Philippines, from Vietnam, they are coming in a big group of people. So we usually, how we describe the migrants, this is one of the models taken from Third Culture Kids, the book. Before they leave their homeland, they have a great involvement in the homeland. And then they consider to leave, and then they have to go through a transition period, and then enter the new country, say Australia, and then they re-involve in this host country. So I want to introduce you with this Hoover Wong. Dr. Hoover Wong is from Fuller Theological Seminary. He passed away a few years ago. So, but I've been in his class. He's an American-born Chinese and have been lecturer in Fuller Theological Seminary for quite almost 20 years, I think. So he introduced to me this dynamic bicultural continuum model. That means the migrants, they, for example, the Asian migrants, they enter Australia. The first day or first year, they are still culturally Asian, or their Asianness is still very strong. But as the number of years in Australia, they maybe take another 4 years, 5 years, or 10 years, their Asianness decreasing, but their Westernness or their Australianness is increasing. So the longer they stay, for example, just now I mentioned I stay in Australia 25 years. So I think in the end, my Westernness or my Australianness is growing much more. Although I would say I'm still very Chinese. I try to say, for example, modify his model into this way. From the left end, we have the traditional Asian in rural area. That means they are not in the cities. They seldom have a chance to meet the foreigners or Caucasian. But the people in the Asian resident in urban areas or cities, they have some chance to meet up with the Westerners. So although they are very Asian, but they are not as Asian as the traditional Asian in rural area. You know what I mean? So say for example, 30 years ago when I migrate to Australia, I'm here at this point. The migrants just arrived from Asia. But after 10 years, after 20 years, after 25 years, maybe I'm here. Maybe I'm here. But compared to my daughter, when we migrated to Australia, my daughter was just 6 years old. But she became, I would say, she was a second generation migrant. So she is here, and she has her family now. her children may be here, but compared with the local Australian, the Caucasian, they are still very Asian. Okay. Now, so this is how we work out our model. Let me show you my family. My son-in-law, my daughter, my grandson, my wife, and myself. If you use this model, how will you say these 5 people? How do you locate these 5 people along this continuum? My son-in-law may be around this area, this point. My daughter, she is a 2nd generation. She may be here. My grandson, he's mixed. So I would say, I'm not sure, maybe here or here. I don't know. All right. So I'm just let you see that it's a family of different culture, cultural identity. All right. Now let's move on. I give you a bit of reflection now. A man born in Taiwan, raised up and educated in Melbourne, worked in South Africa for 6 years, and then went back to Taiwan for 8 years, and then moved on to United States for another 8 years, and now at Canberra. So how do you locate this man's cultural identity? How will you say? Where is he?
2nd generation migrants.
2nd generation migrant. It's not easy to locate, actually. It depends not only about how long he stayed in different parts of the world, but there are also, he has to ask a few questions about himself. Where did I come from? Where did my blood ancestor live? What language or what dialect I speak? I know some people from China, they have been migrated to Australia for 40 years, but the many years of his life stay in Chinatown. It doesn't have to speak English. His life is Chinatown. He goes to a Chinese restaurant. His friends his social circle all Chinese. So 40 years on, but is he Australian? Not quite. Maybe when we ask who am I, where was I raised and educated? Where do I pay tax? Which place go deepest inside me? And maybe one more thing is you have to ask, where's my home? Which place make I feel at home, or give me sense of home, sense of self? You know, this is a bit of your own resolve. How would you like to become? Where is your home? And I think so. Where am I going? Where do I want to be rooted in future? Say, for example, just now the person I mentioned born in Taiwan and in South Africa, in Australia, in South Africa, in Canberra, in United States. I'm not sure what will be his next station, but I would say it's not easy for him unless he would make up his mind. Where am I going? Where do I want to be rooted in future? You know what I mean? So that means when we ask who am I, more than just mention about how long you stay in Australia. So I would say in the factors shaping our cultural identities. So the first thing may be the number of years in Australia. That's of course. The second thing is the language proficiency. How fluent is your English? How willing do you want to speak in English? I know a lot of Asian migrants. They still want to, although they have been in Australia quite a long while, but they still like to speak their own homeland language, their mother language. Another thing is about the formative years. Say, if I migrate to Australia when I was before I was 10, then my formative years in Australia, say 10 years, 20 years, all in Australia, then my person is all in Australia. But if I migrate to Australia, say for myself, I come to Australia in when I was 30 something, 45. So that my formative years already gone. So you could imagine I could still very Asian. Parental influence, personality trait. You are outgoing person or introvert. Degree of social interaction. Do you have friends with Caucasian, with Indian, with New Zealander, with other people from other places? So it's a degree of social interaction. How much you mix with people from different countries. And determinism of assimilation. Now, what I mean is I noticed that a lot of first generation migrants, they come to Australia. Although they come to Australia, the bodies in Australia, but their heart never leave Asia. Many of them still they want to go back to their homeland. Many of them they still identify themselves with their home country. I came from Malaysia, so I still regard myself as a Malaysian. Or I know some Malaysian, they still hold their Malaysian passport. And also about marriage status. Say you married to a Caucasian or married to an Asian or married to a, it depends. Say for example, just now I mentioned about my daughter. She married to a Caucasian. So you could imagine she already make up her mind that her whole life would be very Australian. Okay, so this is all of the factors shaping the cultural identity. So all these factors make it in one go, and then you have to make up your mind. So what do you want to? Now we talk about the second generation migrants. Here I mentioned a book, the third cultural kid. A third cultural kid is a person who has spent a significant part of his developmental years outside the parents' homeland country. Now, what do I mean? That means a person from Singapore or from Philippines, their children or their child born in Australia. So that the second generation is it's not Australian yet. His or her culture is a mixture of his parents and the Australian culture. Say I would say that cultural identity is shaped by two or more cultures and subcultures. And I would say that it's a hybrid culture, mixed culture. A mixture of what cultures? The home culture, say the parent culture, the Asian culture, maybe it's Vietnamese, Hong Kong, Taiwanese, Korean, etc., etc. And the host culture, now the second generation is in Australia. So Australian culture, the postmodern culture, and also the peer culture. Who are the friends? It depends who are their associates. Do I make friends with Indian, Vietnamese, Malaysian, Caucasian, European, so on and so forth? It's about their peer culture. And also the subculture, the online culture, Hollywood or Bollywood, Instagram, K-pop, working holiday, gap years, so on and so forth. So this is the second generation migrants. Now, before I go on, now you can imagine these two generations. The first generation, the parents, they decide to migrate to Australia. This is their resolve. But the second generation, whether they have a say to migrate to Australia, particularly when they are young, if their parents say, our family will migrate to Australia, then that means that the children, when they are very young, they have no say. They have to follow the whole family migrate to Australia. So whether they like it or not. So what if they could not let go of their friends, their relatives in the homeland? So this two generations that because of migration, they create a lot of psychological difficulties. Now let's go on to the second point, the Asian church context. The first, now I put a picture here. Now you notice that the bigger group is the first generation migrants. The smaller group is the second generation migrants. I think this will be a typical Asian church. Typical Asian church founded by the first generation migrants. I show you this later. Now, in a church with two generations, they have generational cultural difference at church. Say on the left hand side, the column. So first generation migrants, the Asian congregation, the ethnic Asian. Their home language is Vietnamese, Chinese, Thai, Indonesia. They are culturally Asian. So the first generation migrants, most of them, they take up the leadership role, senior pastor, or even founder of the ethnic church. How about the second generation? The second generation, most of them, the English congregation, ethnically Asian or Caucasian, because it's an English congregation. So Caucasian, European, New Zealander, whoever can speak English, they can go into the English congregation of this ethnic church. So their host language is English. They're culturally non-Asian. I could not say this culturally Australian, but I will only say it's culturally non-Asian. It could be quite mixed. And the pastor or the leaders of the second generations migrants, at most they are assistant pastor. They are hired. They are subordinate to the senior pastor because the senior pastor, the first generation migrants. Now, so how could you say these two group of congregation? conflict, conflict, conflict. Language difference, cultural difference, and also power, unbalanced power. Who have the final say? Who can make decision? So there are a lot of conflicts here in a lot of Asian churches. Not only Chinese church, Thai church, Korean church, Vietnamese church. I heard a lot of sad stories about all these Asian churches. Now, in terms of conflict, there are levels of a cultural conflict. At the left upper corner is only diversity, right? So we have all walks of life. We have a very big spectrum of different people, very colorful, right? Diversity is good. You know, in Australia we have a multiculturalism, so we celebrate diversity, right? But diversity also implies difference. Okay, we allow difference in opinion, difference in viewpoint, difference in interpretation, different preference, so on and so forth. But difference is also point to disagreement. I don't agree with you, and you don't agree with me. But even disagreement is still okay. We disagree with one another a lot. But when we make comparison, something wrong. When we say comparison, that means we have, I'm good, you are better. No, I'm the best. I'm right, you are wrong. So it's when you make comparison, that means it's not easy to get along already. But more than comparison, we have competition. We compete with one another. We have rivalry. And then we come to conflict. And then we fight. And then we broken relationship. Now, compared with Westerners, if we have broken relationship, or even we have fight, we have broken relationship, we can restore quite easily. But I noticed that a lot of Asian churches, when we come to a point broken relationship, we become indifferent to one another. We don't see each other eye to eye. We go separate way. You go your way, I go mine. And we could understand the end point is Exodus. Why I use the word Exodus? 1996, American-born Chinese girl called Helen Lee. She wrote an article in Christianity Today. The article is named as a silent Exodus. Asian church, the next generation, they leave the church. Exodus. They use the word Exodus. It's very sad. I noticed a lot of Asian churches, the second generation, when they grow up, when they have a they have a driving license, they no longer go to their parents' church. They go to either another church, go to Caucasian church, or they celebrate another church, or even they don't go to church at all. It's very sad. Silent Exodus. They will not fight with you. They will not argue with you. They debate with you. They just leave. Stop going to church. What are the results? Church, 2-generation crash, going separate way, or we say one church, two systems. Just now I mentioned about Hoover Wong, right, from Fuller Seminary. He used the word duplex. In Australia, you know, our buildings some buildings not just a house or not a apartment or a unit. It's a duplex. One block of land You build two houses, but these two houses is we have a wall separate these two houses, two households. So one piece of land or a big house, but separated by a big a wall to separate two households. So in a Chinese church, in an Asian church, in a Korean church, the first generation church congregation and the second generation congregations, one church, two systems. And the pastoral team, usually the after the conflict, second generation pastor or the lay leaders, they leave the church, they leave the pastoral position, and somebody said they leave ministry at all. They don't know, they are very disappointed about the Asian church. I won't do any ministry in Asian church anymore. Asian church is hopeless. And then leadership succession interrupted. Although I know that many old pastors or old leaders, deacons, elders, they want to pass on the baton, so pass on their leadership to the younger generations. But because they're gone, the second generation, they leave the church. So this leadership succession interrupted. And the Asian church become aging and aging and aging and aging. The average age of the Asian church is I don't know, 50, 60, or even 70. The last 5 years, I know a lot of migrants go to Australia again. So some of the Asian church, the Chinese church, they have some younger congregation, but I'm not sure how long this will last. Okay, so let's move on to the third one, the third part, cultural intelligence. Nowadays we have IQ, we have EQ, AQ, SQ, or whatever Q. We also have CQ, cultural intelligence. Actually, I want to introduce a person called Song An. Song An, he's a Singaporean. He's a professor in management at the Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Herself was is a Christian. Her parents, I was told, is a pastor as well. So he's a second generation Christian. So she is also academic. She mentioned this: the more culturally competent, the more culturally competent, the more effectively function in personal and professional intercultural setting. That means if you are well equipped with cultural competence, you are more functioning in cross-cultural or intercultural setting. So you could imagine in Singapore. Singapore is a very multi-ethnic city, or a lot of international companies there. They have international companies, their working teams, IT teams, their professional teams, their IBAN, different teams. They have people from different ethnic background: Indian, Vietnamese, Chinese, American, German. So they have different backgrounds. So you could imagine Song An noticed that the situation, the phenomenon. So she and her team, they take a few years and develop this cultural intelligence measurement to measure the every person's their cultural competence. I also mentioned to you this David Livermore. David Livermore is American, from Mexican University. He's director of our Cultural Intelligence Center. He adopted this CQ. He come to know this Song An, and he adopted this CQ theory in church ministry, ministerial leadership. Now, just now I mentioned that Song and he used this CQ in the business world, in commercial world, but David Liverpool, he adopted this CQ in church ministry, in the leadership, in church leadership. And myself, in 2015, I do my DMIN research. This CQ, cultural intelligence, introduced by my supervisor, and before I didn't know about this the cultural intelligence. And the more I read the articles, the paper, the books, I feel so fascinating. I feel that this is maybe an answer to our Asian church conflict. So I try to adopt this CQ theory in Chinese churches and apply in the theory in Sydney Chinese churches, and particularly among the pastors and the leaders. And I use mixed methods, both quantitative and qualitative. I sent out a questionnaire to almost 100 pastors, and also interview 12 pastors from different backgrounds: senior pastor, youth pastor, a lady pastor, full-time pastor, part-time pastor. So I try to interview different people and try to understand why could they survive in their ethnic church, two-generation conflict? How could they survive? What are the factors? Or why didn't it work out well? So I try to find out why. Talk about CQ. What is CQ? The definition is about cultural intelligence is a person's capability to function effectively in situations characterized by cultural diversity. It's a person's capacity. It's a capacity. It's a cross-cultural capacity, so that you could function effectively in cross-cultural context. Song Ann also mentioned about cultural intelligence is a multi-disciplinary model which provides a coherent framework for dealing with issues in intercultural setting. So it's a model for you to, later on I will share with you a little bit about this model. It's a model so that you could have this model, this framework to deal with issues in intercultural setting. Cultural intelligence gives you the practical and interpersonal skills needed when the cultural context changes. Now, CQ it involves 4 areas. 1, CQ knowledge. When you greet with Asian, you will not shake hand. You would bow your head. So this is very basic CQ knowledge. When you go to Thailand, you never touch a young boy's hair. This is cultural knowledge. Okay. CQ drive. How willing, how determined you want to reach out to people from other culture. I tell you a story. A lady in her 30-something. She's very gifted, very capable. She works in a international company. So she performed very well, and her boss loved her very much. So afterward the management team sent her to India to set up a regional office there, to head up a regional office there in India. But this young lady, she refused to go. She said, you can send me to Malaysia, you can send me to Vietnam, you can send me to Australia, but never send me to India. Her boss didn't know why. Later on, they have good talk. And then this young lady disclosed a story. A story is about when this young lady graduated from university, her first job was in an Indian company, and her boss sexual harassing. Oh, because I think she is not really worried about Indian, but this bad experience caused her. I would never work with any Indian anymore. Now, very sad, because one unpleasant or one very bad experience, her CQ drive is very, very low. Okay, so CQ knowledge, CQ drive, and CQ strategy. That means that you have some knowledge about different culture people. You are willing to work with people. So how about what is your strategy to work with different cultural people from different culture? Say, for example, you want to make a deal with a group of German. You have meeting. Say, for example, you have meeting at 2 o'clock, for example. You would not arrive the meeting at 2 o'clock. You will arrive the meeting at least 15 minutes before. Why? German. They are very precise. When you talk about, well, we have meeting start at 2 o'clock, they would sit in front of their meeting table. All of their documents all prepared. Every pen or pencil, they point at the same direction. So this is a German. You know how to work with that. This is a CQ strategy. But if you want to make a deal with an American, for example, you have a meeting at 2 o'clock. Oh, you can arrive at 2 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock the meeting starts. No. You can make a talk about the weather. Hi, today is beautiful. Or we talk about make a few jokes before you really go into the business. Okay, now so this is the CQ strategy. When you deal with different cultural background people, and you formulate a different strategy. And then the last is CQ action. So you compile all of these different CQ knowledge, CQ drive, CQ strategy, and translate into actions. Now, I show you this. This is a simplified questionnaire to measure your CQ, the cultural intelligence. I'll let you have a look of these questions. The first 4 is about CQ knowledge. I'm conscious of cultural knowledge I use when interact with people with different cultural backgrounds. I adjust my cultural knowledge as I interact with people from a culture that is unfamiliar to me. I'm conscious of cultural knowledge I apply to cross-cultural interactions. I check the accuracy of my cultural knowledge as I interact with people from different culture. So you have box to take. So you can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc., etc. And then CQ strategy. Another group of questions. I know the legal and economic systems of other cultures. I know the rules, say, vocabulary, grammar of other cultures, of other languages. I know the cultural values and religious beliefs of other cultures. I know the knowledge, the marriage systems of other cultures. I know the art and crafts of other cultures. I know the rules for expressing non-verbal behavior in other cultures, so on and so forth. I won't go through every single question, but I want to let you know is that you have this simplified questionnaire to measure your cultural intelligence. This is a simplified thing. But we have another one. It's a compiled 54 questionnaires. And we still have another one, more extensive one, which is 120. But you have to pay quite a big sum of dollar and to do that test. Now, what I mean is, I want to let you know that when we measure our CQ knowledge, CQ strategy, CQ drive, and CQ action, you have different questions to ask yourself. Now, you have a cultural knowledge is one matter. How do you interpret? That's another matter. Now, what I mean is, we have symbol, surface level. We have interpretation, deep level. That means you observe people's behavior and you have some interpretation. For example, you notice that, oh, we have a family, they have New Year banquet. So this is visible, our external behavior. But how do you interpret it? How do you interpret? What's the reason? What's the intention? What's the meaning behind? Meaning one, it could be a New Year banquet, could be a celebration. Meaning two, it could be a showing off. Or I'm a rich family, I could afford a big banquet for New Year dinner, for example. But New Year banquet for people from a very poor family, it could be pressure. I can't afford. I'm very poor. I'm not rich. So how could I afford this big New Year big banquet? Now, so this is how do you interpret the behavior? For example, in church setting, oh, you have a 50th anniversary dinner. All right, your church is celebrating a 50 years anniversary. Wow, it's an important occasion. You organize a dinner. How do we interpret? For some church leaders, oh, it's a celebration. Wow, 50 years is a big achievement. But for another group of people or other group, oh, we have 50th anniversary dinner. So all the church members come together, have a dinner. Oh, that's a symbol of unity. We oneness. But maybe some young people is waste of money. 50th anniversary. How come you spend so much money to just having a meal? It's meaningless. Now, so you see, we have visible symbol. We have visible form. It's a dinner. But different people could have different interpretation. But just now we mentioned about one symbol. We have 3 meanings. You could have 3 symbols, but have one interpretation. For example, you want to do a reunion, right? What could you do? You're working in other cities or some other countries overseas. Okay, New Year you return home. That's reunion. Or you have a dinner, year-end dinner. Or you have got a Christmas party. Say for a lot of American, Canadian, Thanksgiving party, Thanksgiving. These are all reunion. How about church? Oh, this is 100th anniversary celebration. How could you celebrate? You could have banquet, a dinner. You could have revival meeting, or you could have outreach rally. I've tried to serve the poor people, the homeless people. It could be an outreach one. Now, you know what I mean. So even we have a different forms, different symbols, but we can point to the same objective, purpose. The problem is that we have this kind of cultural interpretations from day to day. But all we could see is the visible external behavior, the symbols. Something we could not see is the underneath, the invisible, the internal motives. How do we interpret? Now, I would say in our church, in the Asian church, we always make a lot of interpretation with our visible behaviors. But how could we be sure that our interpretation is right? I would not say sometimes it's not interpreted, it's just a guess. It's just a guess. And the problem is that we all have our cultural values. Our cultural values affect how we do interpretation. So now I'd like to introduce another person. It's called Jeff Hostel. He's a Dutch social psychologist, and he do a lot of organizational psychology. So he make up a large-scale research from 75 countries or areas of people from the world, and later and then he wrote up this book, The Cultures and Organizations Software of the Mind. He said, all our cultural background is like a software of the mind. Software of the mind. So in his book, he formulated these 7 pairs of cultural values. The first pair, individualism, collectivism. Second pair, low power distance, high power distance. Third, low uncertainty avoidance, high uncertainty avoidance, so on and so forth. Now, I won't go into detail of every pair of this. I want to share with you this. For example, high power distance, low power distance. Who are the high power distance? Hierarchy, many layers. So both leaders and followers assume leaders have more authority, respect, and status. Employees, subordinates, students, children never question their managers, their teachers, or their parents. So this is the high power distance people. How about the low power distance? Low power distance is the no hierarchy, very flat. You see the I display a diagram here. Everyone on the same level, flat structure. So everyone in the group, in the team, they are equal. Expect consultative, participative, or democratic decision-making style. They allow questioning, learning, adapting, debate, divergent views. The children expect parents to give rationale for the decision. Say the high power distant people assume leaders will have special privilege, such as own parking space, private dining room, enclosed office. Low status people is expected to give loyalty and respect, filial piety to the high status person. And older ones require younger ones to take order and follow instruction. How about the low power people? No hierarchy. Everyone is equal. All members are partners. We are partners. We don't have leaders or subordinates. We are all partners. But what do you mean by partners? Partnership means equality instead of a junior, senior, patron or client relationship. Okay. Now, when it comes to the church setting, traditional Asian pastors, they are most of them are high power distance. Westernized pastors, most of them low power distance. Or in our Asian church setting, for example, the first generation leaders, senior pastor, most of them are high power distance. The second generation pastors, second generation leaders, most of them, they grow up in Australia, they are low power distance. So what would, when these two group of people interact, what would it become? The traditional Asian pastors, the senior pastor, the elders, the deacons, they regard questioning as criticizing, blaming, disobedience, disrespect, distrust, or rebellion. But for those low-powered pastors or leaders, the second generation leaders, they see questioning is simple, is normal. Questioning as voicing out their opinions, exploring other alternatives, suggesting unconventional solutions. You see, the traditional Asian pastors, they see when you people asking questions, you are challenging us, challenging the leader's authority and undermine the leadership. But no. The westernized pastors, they say no. We are just we ask questions showing our full participation, our productive communication, cooperative teamwork, and complementary partnership. Now, see, if this group of people, they have different power distance, high power distance, low power distance. And when this group come together to have a meeting, when they have to have a decision to make, how these two groups interact? A lot of problem. In terms of decision making, in high power distance community, important decisions are only made by the top leaders or the senior pastors. Okay? And only trivial decisions are allowed to be made by younger pastors or younger leaders. But the third point is simple, is important. It is the senior pastor who decide which matter are important, which matter are trivial. And final, the fourth point is for the sake of efficiency or convenience, senior pastor tend to make decisions do not explicitly explain the rationale of the decision. So they make decisions, but they reluctant to explain the rationale why they make this decision. What's the rationale behind? So you could imagine the younger pastors, the members feel confused of being not involved by past insignificant and insignificant. So this is a different power distance and the decision making that create a lot of chaotic or a lot of confusion in the Asian church, and this is how our cultural value that affect our how we interpret one another, cultural behavior. Okay, so once I know a person in the church, he mentioned to the younger people, he said, as the church is a family, we are family members, so we should have mutual trust. Okay, and you younger ones should trust me, the older leader, so I don't need to tell them everything in detail. After all, I'm your senior, you should trust me. What will you say? What will you respond? If you are younger generation, if you are second generation, what will you say? What will you respond?
I think we're too scared to say truthful.
Okay, we move on. And I mentioned about another pair of cultural value: high context and low context. What's high context? High context are people, they concentrate on the not only on the spoken message or spoken word, but also the unspoken message, reading between the lines, we say. The low context, the people, they only focus on spoken words, what you say, the concept, the principle of the theories. Now, the high context people, they have attentive listening, what has been said and what has not been said. Now, this is something interesting. They would particularly listen to what you say and what you did not say. But the second generation pastors, they listen to what is said and only what is said. Oh, this create a lot of problem. The high context people value harmonious relationship, but the low context people, they're mindful of the personal, direct, unambiguous communication. The high context people, they listen to the demands and expectation behind unspoken words and unfinished statements. You know, Asians tend to be a bit reserved. Sometimes they will say something without finishing, and they think that you should understand what is my unspoken word, what is my unfinished statements. But the problem is who is their partners, the second generation pastors. They do not listen to the demands and expectation behind. Okay, the high context people, the Asian pastor, first generation pastors, non-verbal communication, subtlety of real life setting. This is what they want to look at. But the second generation pastor, westernized pastor, low context, they only do explicit verbal conversation. The high context pastors speak less or even use silence. The low context pastors, they seldom take notes of the context. They seldom take note of body language or the facial expression. The high context people, they prefer hinting, prompting indirectly. But the low context people, they operate from rational faculty and linear logic. A is bigger than B, B is bigger than C, so A is bigger than C. This is linear logic. Expressing opinion and argument points, indiscreetly keep asking and questioning. Indiscreetly keep asking and questioning, which is something the first generation pastor, the first generation leaders, they hate most. The first generation pastor leaders, they expect the younger ones could understand the unspoken expression. But the second generation pastor, the low context people, only consider the what, the information, the fact, what they say, and do not notice the how, the when, the where, and the who. The less the senior pastors speak, the more the young pastors ask. The first generation pastors, they feel annoyed and reluctant to speak. But their counterpart, the westernized pastors, second generation pastors, they feel confused and are more likely to speak. So this is very sad. Now, I list different types of non-verbal communication. It's taken from Scott Moria from a book, Effective Intercultural Communication. Scott is from Wheaton College, from America, Chicago area. He mentioned about this different type of non-verbal communications, which is the first generation pastor they love to employ. The timing. What time is that? What time you say something? Your body language, your face, your body movement, your tone of voice. Or we say, it's different tone of voice, volume of voice, choice of word. We talk about the government, the politician, or the civil servant. Very different choice of word. Facial expression or silence. When you ask them something, he didn't say a word, it's silence. Or occasional shine. Then a lot of words were spoken. Repeated coughing. Some people they disguise with the speech. They want to speak anything. They want to answer anything. They keep coughing. So this is a very interesting thing. Folding arms, eye contact. Now, so you see, there's a lot of non-verbal communication, but unfortunately, our second generation pastors, leaders, the westernized, the low context people, they seldom notice this kind of non-verbal communication, or sometimes they notice, but they don't know why. Why their first generation pastor? What did they cough? Why did they shine? Okay, we come to practical implications. The main part is how do we improve our cultural competence, sensitivity. Before I was a very I won't pay enough attention to the people. I'm very insensitive person. I don't pay attention to people's facial expression, or their tone, or their unspoken words. But I learned in the hard way, and I make a lot of trouble, and conflict with quite a lot of people. So and after all, I noticed sensitivity. Be sensitive people's what they say. Why did they make such a statement? Why do they respond like that? So sensitivity, trust, curiosity, perseverance, self-awareness, people interaction, being an outsider, resolving conflict, language proficiency. Now, about language. Once I tried to interview a second generation pastor. This second generation pastor is very special. He want to connect with the first generation pastors or first generation leaders. So he want to learn Mandarin. See how he expressed. He said, first of all, is learning the language, such as Mandarin. I watched Mandarin movies and listened to Mandarin songs. I did it every day, 4 hours a day. Wow, quite a lot. I learned from a Mandarin teacher 1 hour a week. Learn Mandarin from a teacher. Then I did Bible study with her for another hour. Use Mandarin, of course. And I watched Mandarin TV for another 2 hours. I talked to people, even though I didn't fully understand. I forced myself to listen. More listening and more understanding of the culture and need. You see, what's happening? I think this second generation pastor, although he basically is the English speaking, but he has a strong determination, a strong drive. So he tried to learn Mandarin. He wants to reconnect with his senior pastor. In fact, when I interviewed him, I asked, did your senior pastor learn English? I asked the same question. Did your senior pastor, the first generation leaders, they learn English? No. But this second generation pastor, I want to learn Mandarin so that I can reconnect with him. So sad with the first generation pastor, but I'm proud of this second generation pastor. I love him very much. Very, very determining. Let me tell you some of my personal stories. Now, just now I mentioned about my daughter. She married to a young Australian Caucasian man. So I have to communicate with them in English nowadays. They have been in Melbourne, and whenever I visit them, I have to communicate with them in English. Although my English is not very fluent and strong Hong Kong accent, but this I have no choice. I have to communicate with them in English and try to accommodate to them. Just now I mentioned about my. I want to show you this is this is my church before. We have a pastoral team of 7 people. Myself, Michael Chu, Hong Kong migrant, around 60s. And then we have a Chinese pastor, A. He is also from Hong Kong, around 40s, 20 years old, younger than me. And then we have a Chinese pastor, B, born in mainland, came to Sydney at 14 years old, studied high school and uni, and then go back to Hong Kong, study for his theological training, and minister in church in Hong Kong for 10 years, and then back to Sydney. Pastor C, Chinese, Vietnamese Chinese, migrate to Sydney at 8 years old, study and work, and then later on become a pastor when he was 35 years old. And then we have an English pastor, Caucasian, Canberra born, with a Chinese wife, but his Chinese wife doesn't speak Chinese. So he studied uni at Melbourne, exchange student at Germany, studied theology at Sydney, and now minister, or at that time, minister at my church. English pastor Yi, a Brisbane-born Caucasian, and went to South Africa for 30 years, and came to Sydney and ministered at our church. And finally, we have another lady pastor, F, born and studied in Australia. So this is our pastoral team. How do we work together? How do we have a pastoral team meeting? How do we pray and discuss matters? How do we evaluate our ministry? Or how do we fight? So it's very difficult. Actually, just now I mentioned this pastor A, Chinese pastor A. His English is not good at all. He could not. He hardly speak English. So he's quite left out in this pastoral team. Now, how do I pull this group together? Now we have a weekly pastoral team meeting. We have weekly prayer meeting. We have input day. What do you mean by input day? We attend conference together, preaching conference. We attend seminar. We attend or we sometimes we exchange our sermons. We discuss our sermons. We have 3 days retreat. We have relaxation day. So we have different activities or exercise. We have one-on-one meeting. We have family gathering. We visit one another, our family visit. We have New Year celebration. So what I mean is how do this intercultural leadership team, we can do work together we try to make different occasions to. Now, we have just now mentioned relaxation day. We go picnic. We have meal together. We have bush walk. We飲茶. Just now I mentioned about in our team we have 3 Caucasian pastors. They love 飲茶 very much. And I asked them, now you order dim sum. You order dim sum. You order dim sum in Cantonese. If you don't order in Cantonese, we don't have any food to eat. So we have 飲茶. We have war game. We have rock climbing. You can imagine how a Michael Chu can do rock climbing with them. We have tea and coffee. We have table tennis. We have board games, so on and so forth. We have lots of this kind of games play together, so we can be relaxed with one another. We don't have to be on guard with one another. In fact, we can see one another, a real person, when we are relaxed. When we are relaxed. Okay, I finish here. I think the time is running out. So okay. So
Yep.
Grace, pass to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael, for ending on that, those personal stories and sharing your experience. I think that's what you've shared with us today has been extremely helpful for many of us. So I might start with some of the questions that we received during registration, and then we'll move on to some that people want to ask from the floor. So if you've got questions, please type them in the chat. And I know that there were many questions that came in, but I'll try to focus on the ones on cultural intelligence and Asian churches. So I think one question that I had here was, did you have any tips for Anglo senior pastors working with the mainland Chinese first generation pastor?
Okay, good question. Let me show you once more this slide. Forbear, forsake, forgive. I think Anglo pastors, because you have been in Australia that long, you are very Australian. You have to forbear with the Chinese pastors, Asian pastors, the Vietnamese pastors, Korean pastors, because our culture is still on the way of learning our language, our culture. So you have to forbear our diversity, our difference, and give us allowance. Now, I love my English pastors in my church very much, because they try to rephrase. Sometimes when our Chinese pastor we try to say something which is quite ambiguous, quite not make it very clear. So they will try to repeat what we say in order to make sure they have listened to it rightly. Now, so this is quite a time consuming, quite inefficient in terms of time. So give allowance and benefit of doubt. So now I would say sometimes we make a rush judgment. But if they don't ask me, or they don't ask the Chinese pastor to repeat what we say, that would become chaotic. So this is the number one: forbear, forsake authoritarianism. I'm the senior pastor. Sometimes I will say things in rush, and they they have to forsake authority. Forgive. Sometimes I make a wrong decision. forgive confrontational style in conflict resolving, forgive passive aggressiveness. So, as a Chinese, I still can't get rid of my aggressiveness, assertiveness, but sometimes in a very passive way. So for those Caucasian, Anglo, the Westerners, they don't know why would I behave that way, and they would caring enough to confront me, to talk to me directly, and take time to resolve that the conflict. So I would say this 3F: forbear, forsake, and forgive. Hopefully could answer just now, Grace, what you asked.
Thank you so much. Another question that I've had from people, I guess, what are some examples of major cultural or conflicts that you've maybe heard or seen in Asian migrant churches? And I guess, yeah, how would we go about, I mean, you've already mentioned some ways we could go about those conflicts, but I guess, yeah, particularly when they're quite intense or the conflict is very bad. Yeah, what are some ways we can work through it, if it's possible at all? So number one, what are some major conflicts you've seen in migrant churches, and what are some tips you might have to begin to work through them?
Okay. If we have a very heated conflict, major one, and become emotional, we can't talk anymore. So the best way is to put it down for a few days. And then I say, for example, when I have a conflict with my English English pastors, I will message him or email him that, oh, so and so pastor, I will talk to you in 3 days' time. In 3 days' time, I will talk to you on this matter, this matter, and this matter. I want to clarify this question, that question. Now, why I do in that way is that when people become very emotional, we can't discuss constructively, productively. But number two, I will still want to resolve that conflict. So I would post my concerns through the email or through the message. So let him prepare how he could answer my concern. Or in the same way, I also ask him, say, in 3 days' time, when we come together to talk about it again. So what is your concern for me? Tell me your concern. So again, I have 3 days' time to think about that, to prepare, to try to work out. So quite a few times we could resolve conflict in this way. So number one, don't discuss anymore emotionally. Number two, prepare for your discussion, prepare for your conflict resolving. But yeah, I learned it the hard way, I must confess. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I guess just one more question from the list I have, then I'll pass it to Andrew. I think you spoke in your book that a lot of English-speaking pastors tend to be more aware or have, I don't know, I think it was more knowledge or drive in some of these issues. How would you advise second-generation pastors in, I guess, encouraging first-generation pastors to increase their CQ knowledge or CQ drive? Yeah, improve their CQ, I guess. Yeah.
The first generation pastors.
Yeah, how would second-generation pastors encourage them without being, I don't know, being disrespectful or, yeah.
I suspect I don't have a good answer. The reason is, in Asian context, the younger ones seldom can help or encourage or it's very hard for the younger ones to encourage the older pastors. So sometimes I will encourage the younger pastors go through the third parties. Say for example, I come across a few times our second generation pastor have conflict with our first generation deacons, lay leaders. So I encourage them to talk to me first, and then I try to rephrase their concern in a more nice way with the first generation leaders. Okay, that was quite much easier, and it's because I'm more or less the same age with the first generation deacon, so that's easier for the point to get through. But I'm quite sure because my role in that conflict has served as a third party, serve as a buffer to minimize all those undesirable emotions. So this is I would suggest like that.
That's helpful. Thank you. Andrew?
Thanks, Dr. Michael. It's been really good lecture so far. So grateful. We've got a few questions in the chat, which a lot of them to do with conflict. So I'm going to try to summarize in one question, if I may. I know you answered a little bit already, but this might be slightly more nuanced. So as an example, in my previous church, we had conflict, and it would have happened 3-4 years ago, let's just say. And it was a big one, right? But rather than getting around the table and doing what you did, email people or try to resolve the conflict, actually, I found in a lot of Asian churches, they just don't want to resolve. And a lot of times, actually, it's easier just to split a church. For instance, the Cantonese goes this way, the Mandarin goes this way, English go this way. So in your experience, what's, this is one of the questions, do you think it's Asian culture that it's hard to resolve conflict? And two, if there is conflict, what can either party do about it?
But I want to know more about just now I mentioned both parties, they don't want to resolve.
Yep.
Why?
I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of people, but I'm sure there's a lot of people in this call who have witnessed, for instance, their parents, they fight over some theological thing or some library or some, something, right? And they just stick their heels in and be like, no, you're wrong. And the church ends up splitting, if that makes sense. Here's an example. I mean, this is probably more of a legitimate example, but one pastor was more charismatic than the other in terms of expression of theology, splits a church. Here's another one that I know. One pastor, believed in the LGBTQI, other one didn't, split the church. I think that's a bit more logical. But there are thousands of these stories, if that makes sense, Michael. And so one of the questions here is, do you think that Asian churches tend to find it hard to resolve conflicts? And if that is the case, what can be done about it from either generation point of view?
Okay, good question. Yeah, and very relevant. I agree that in lots of Asian churches, as far as I know, whenever there's conflict, it's not easy to resolve for a few things. Number one, we are not prepared for that. How we prepare for that is another matter. Just now, later on, I'll mention a little bit. But we are not prepared for that. We are used to be harmonious with one another. We want to, you're okay, I'm okay. So as if we don't have any problem at all. But that's not true. That's not the fact. So that's why we have problems. We have conflicts most of the time. Now, in terms of my church, I remember once we have some theological difference. In our pastoral team, we have two pastors. One strongly support adult baptism. Another one strongly advocate for infant baptism. So in the pastoral team, two pastors, they have very strong view on this baptism thing. So as a senior pastor, how would I do? Now, of course I would take side. I tend to be more inclined to the adult baptism more because of my church background, Baptist church background. So but I want to resolve that difference. So what do? I said, oh, look, how about we take time to do a bit of research? Pastor A, you do a bit of research. Why do you advocate for your infant baptism thing? You write a short paper, 2 pages or 3 pages. Pastor B, tell me, why do you want to support this adult baptism? Again, write a 3-page or 2-page essays, whatever. So after a month, after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, then these two pastors, they have present their own position in with well-prepared way. They think through the theology and then come together, we discuss. Now that become a theological discussion rather than an emotional heated debate. So by this way, now what I mean is that I want people to prepare to resolve conflict. People won't prepare, they can't resolve conflict. Prepare not only psychologically, prepare not only emotionally, but also prepare rationally. So just now I mentioned the CQ, right? The CQ knowledge. We have to be aware what's the difference in terms of the cognitively, the rationally. So that's why I ask people to my two pastors to prepare for that. Number 2, our congregations, they are not prepared to resolve conflicts. Our group leaders, our Bible study leaders, the home group leaders, they have conflicts in their own groups, week after week, day after day. So when I do the small group or home group leaders training, one of the main topic I would train them is how to be a mediator, how to be a peacemaker. So I, apart from do the biblical teaching, but also share with them what is social psychology, what is organizational psychology, that kind of thing, that help them to have some more understanding how people reason, how people what's going on in the heart when they have conflict. So by this way, I minimize the group interpersonal conflict in the church. So again, it's prepare, but this time I not prepare for them doctrinally, but prepare them in terms of ministry skill.
Understand. So it sounds like as a senior pastor, then you feel like your role is to resolve that conflict, right? So that is the case that since you were the senior pastor, you would take an active role in resolving conflict.
Or prepare, equip people to resolve.
Understood.
And another thing is, you don't mind, I will add one more thing is that
of course,
I preach.
Sure.
I preach conflict.
Great.
When I preach, not only preach do the Bible teaching, but also give a lot of case study as an illustration.
Sure.
So when I do, when sometimes in my preaching, I will give tell them some story. Actually, it's a real case. Of course, it's adopted from other churches. So let them to have I would taste, this kind of case that can be resolved in this way, or that kind of case that can be resolved in that way. So they try to familiarize with them, so that they would be whenever they have a similar conflict, they are more prepared to resolve. So
Right.
again, it's prepared.
Great, thank you. I've got another question here, if I may. This is
Probably last one. Yeah.
Yeah, is it last one? Yeah, fair enough. But thank you, everyone. Sorry I couldn't get to all your questions. There will be a recording of this lecture. They'll be emailed out. So just watch for that as well if you've missed on anything else. How do you resolve church-making decisions between first and second generation pastors when it comes to the final say? So you've got a first generation pastor like yourself, got a second generation pastor like Grace, her husband, and myself even. There always seems to be some kind of conflict where the senior pastor, which is a first generation pastor, tends to know best, if that makes sense, Michael. And so a lot of times their say will be final. How would you resolve that? Some people, here's an example, some people, an expression might best be said like this. The senior pastor or the first generation pastor wants the second generation and the second generation English ministry want to have a say, but that say is often a high chair and not an actual seat at the table, if that makes sense. That's an expression, if that makes sense. So what would you say to that?
I do it two sides. Number one, I do it from the first generation leaders or the pastors. Of course, I would always talk to the first generation pastors or the first generation leaders. Hey, people, refrain from making decisions in a rush. That means I say, listen more, listen more, listen more. And sometimes making decisions, don't make it in one go. Break down the big decision into 2 or 3 or 4 small decisions, so that allow people to voice out their opinion, their alternatives. So I always say, when in our church is a more congregational church. The chairman of our board is a decision-making board person. So I always refrain to say, come on, so and so brother, we could delay or postpone the decision for 1 more month. We can make a decision not this month, this meeting. We can make it next meeting. Okay, so from one side, I try to slow down the first generation pastor or leaders. The second thing is I try to prepare the second generation leaders or pastors. If they want to make a certain decision, they want to voice out alternatives, or they want to voice out their point of view, well prepared for that. So prepare in 2 ways. One, they write up something, or a discussion paper or a suggestion paper. So don't make it a long essay. 1 page is good enough. The first generation leaders that they have no patience to read that long. So 1 page suggestion. Number 2 is we have a rehearsal in our pastoral team. I asked the English pastors, the leaders, come to our pastoral team to rehearse with me once, so that if I have query, but I can do it in more graceful way, because I try to be and ask questions, nice questions, and so that they can go back and to revise their suggestion paper or their discussion paper. So by this way, I prepare the second generation pastors, the second generation leaders, so that they can make a sensible, make an informative suggestion to the first generation leaders. Now, so by this way, number one, I slow down the first generation leaders. Second one, I try to prepare the second generation leaders. Try to pull two parties closer together. So this is my way to resolve. As a senior pastor, I try to facilitate their decision making, not that emotional, at least.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Michael. Sorry I couldn't get to everyone's questions. I'll pass it back to Grace.
Yeah, so sorry we have run over time, but we are bringing our time here to a close officially. So yeah, once again, thank you so much, Dr. Chu, and thank you all of you for investing time into the health of the Asian Migrant Church. As you may know, today is brought to you by CAC and MST. So we are doing more events, and we would love to serve you as you minister in your Asian context. So please connect with us, engage with the other things we're doing that are coming up. I might end tonight in a word of prayer, so please join me. Father God, we praise you for your infinite and perfect wisdom. We acknowledge we desperately need your wisdom and guidance as we serve the Asian Migrant Church, and we acknowledge our lack and our weaknesses that may have caused hurt to others. Thank you for Jesus' forgiveness, and thank you for his empowering through the Spirit. Thank you so much for Dr. Chu's work, and we pray that we may use it for the growth of our churches and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Great. Thank you all, and hope to connect with you in other forms in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.